talking about how great the Leafs have been. They're 14-3-2 after 19 games. They seem to be running away with the Canadian division at this point. What are your thoughts now moving forward? Like, is this a lock at this point? Like, is this Canadian division now the Leafs to lose? Like, it looks like they're on a President's Trophy winning trajectory. It looks like they're going to be, one of the top 3 or 4 teams in the league when this is all said and done after 56 games. So what are your thoughts on this Canadian division moving forward?
Yeah, I mean, 19 games in. It's funny. You said it earlier. They were 19 games in. And then I said earlier, I'm like, what are they, 15, 16 games in? The season's moving extra quickly. Maybe because of the weirdness of it that I forgot how many games we had played. But looking at the standings here, I mean, as it stands right now, they've played more games, but the Oilers quietly are 12-8 right now. And we're being completely counted out. And now Montreal, again, games at hand, like 9-5-2 is still a nice record. Calgary's dropped off. But as far as the Leafs go at the top, both in the way of what the standings are right now and the way they've looked, I think I'd be absolutely baffled if this team didn't finish on top of the division. I think the more interesting or more fun discussion is who's going to finish 2, 3, and 4 and what order they're going to finish in, because we've been saying for weeks this is going to be a 2-horse race between the Habs and Leafs for first place. And then it's just going to be a matter of who's going to slot in a 3 and 4 and who's going to play who in the first round. But as it looks, I mean, Winnipeg and Edmonton have told us to settle down, that they're not going anywhere. So still a lot of hockey to be played. But I think what we can see out of it, and again, we can touch on this, is that, like, it seemed like last week the team to shit on was the Vancouver Canucks. We've been shitting on the Sens all season, but now it's Calgary. Like, Calgary's been a disaster, like 8-9-1 through 18. And then you have, again, Montreal, Winnipeg, Edmonton, who are kind of creeping away from them. So are we going to get to a point halfway through the season where the 4 teams are locked in and they're just jockeying for position? So I don't know. I mean, for sure, none of those 3 teams, well, the Leafs can't relax either. But as far as placing goes, those 3 teams can't relax. I mean, it looks like they'll be battling till the end.
Yeah, I totally agree with you on that. I think it's the more interesting conversation now is how things are going to shake out behind the Leafs, because I would be absolutely flabbergasted if the Leafs don't win the Canadian division. They're top to bottom the best team. They're off to an incredible start. And once again, I just want to reiterate, it is not early. This is a 56 game season. We're 19 games in when it comes to the Toronto Maple Leafs. Like, what you're seeing now is probably what you're going to see, 35 games from now. And I think something that we definitely need to bring up is the Montreal Canadiens, because I could have sworn, Lepore, that 2 weeks ago, the Montreal Canadiens were a juggernaut, according to Chris Johnston of Sportsnet.
Right.
And they had all this depth, and they had Carey Price, and their defense core was great, and they were the best team in the Canadian division. But Lepore, was everybody wrong about the Montreal Canadiens?
Oh, that's a good question, Bruno. I like it. Was everybody wrong about the Montreal Canadiens? I still think they're a really good team. I just think things are starting to even out now. They had some rough losses in the last week or so. Or it's not the week, they had the week off. In the last 2 weeks, I should say. But they're a balanced team. They're a nice team. Are they an elite team? I do not think they are. I think they're a playoff team, and I think they have pieces that I think they can give anyone a fight in the playoffs. And I have said on this podcast earlier, the Montreal Canadiens scared the shit out of me from a playoffs perspective, just in the way that the extra hype will come around a playoff series versus them. They have a goalie who can be the best goalie in the world, and they have the types of players who are all good enough just to fucking annoy you over a 7-game series. And I say that as a compliment. So were people wrong? I mean, it was a Canadian team doing very well, and everyone loves to hear about the Montreal Canadiens or Toronto Maple Leafs doing very well or doing poorly, because you're either going to love it or hate it, and you're going to respond to it. So I'm sure Chris Johnson knew what he was doing, throwing out those tweets about the juggernaut that was the Montreal Canadiens. What was hilarious was that it was the week before the series the Leafs had with the Canucks that Montreal played Vancouver, and Montreal beat up on Vancouver. And the take was that Montreal is way better than we expected, and they'll be fighting the Leafs. They are the best team in the division. And then the Leafs beat up on Vancouver, and the take was, wow, the Canucks are shit. And it was like, oh, funny. funny how it was spun the other way when we happen to beat them. But to be honest, I think those three teams are similar. I think, well, I should say they're similar in the way of what their ceiling is. Those three teams being Winnipeg, Montreal, and Edmonton, in the way that they're good enough to give anyone a fight. They're not elite teams. But what's cool is that they're all very different. Like I said, Montreal is a balanced team. Edmonton is a team that has, like, you know, the juggernaut that is McDavid and Draisaitl at the top, and then it kind of drips down as you go down the lineup. And Winnipeg is kind of like an in-between, where it's not super high-end talent, but I wouldn't call it a balanced lineup either. So it'll be fun. It'll be fun to watch the rest of the season to see how these teams do and see where they end up. What do you think? Will you say at this point, like, are Calgary and Vancouver completely out of it? I'll ask you that.
I think here's the thing. Coming into the season, I've said this on a previous show that I thought the Canucks would be like a top 3 team in the Canadian division.
Really? Okay.
And that may have been, you know, it now kind of looks like a terrible take looking back at it, but you know, I just sort of looked at all the other teams after the Leafs, right? We both agreed we thought the Leafs were the best team in the division coming into the season, just based on roster, depth, talent, all that. And I looked at the Canucks and I'm like, they're really good, especially in their top 6. And I know their goaltending isn't great. And you're seeing that with Demko and Holtby. They have not been very good this season, and their defense core is struggling a little bit. But even when you look at like a guy like Quinn Hughes, right? So I thought that they had enough talent to easily be a playoff team in this division. And it's interesting because I like that point you brought up, how those other teams behind the Leafs are all different and they all have holes, right? It's like you look at Edmonton, they have the top end talent, but defensively they're still kind of a disaster and their goaltending isn't very good. And then the Habs are balanced, but don't have the top end talent. The Canucks, they have some top end talent, but they have holes on defense and goaltending. So it's like all of those, I wouldn't really count out Calgary or Vancouver yet as, you know, as crazy as that might even seem. Like, oh, Bruno, look, like we're already almost halfway through the season and these teams are falling behind. I wouldn't totally count them out yet. I still think that they're going to be in the race. Now, they better pick it up, especially Vancouver. And again, they have their problems and they're behind in the standings right now. But I still think that there's a little bit of time where if they can get going, things are going to get interesting for those 2, 3, and 4 spots in the Canadian division. Because at the end of the day, as great as McDavid's playing, and sure, maybe he can just carry this team the entire season, that team still has a lot of issues.
Yeah.
And that's why I would not be surprised one bit if it finishes, 2, 3, 4, whether it's Edmonton, Winnipeg, Habs, Edmonton, Winnipeg. You put Calgary or Vancouver in one of those spots. I just think that those teams are, when you kind of look at the big picture and you kind of zoom out a little bit, you realize that they're all kind of in the same boat and that there's not really a team amongst that group that is like head and shoulders above the rest. I think you just have kind of the Leafs in their own tier. And then, sure, you could say that Edmonton is the second best team just because of McDavid and Draisaitl. But, you go down that roster and
there's an argument. Yeah.
There's an argument that they still have several holes and that you can't really trust that team. Because look what happened last year against the Blackhawks in the qualifying round. McDavid and Draisaitl played out of their damn minds and they lost in 4 games to the friggin' worst team in the Western Conference.
Yeah.
Right. So that's why I'm still a little skeptical when it comes to the Edmonton Oilers. And then, speaking about the Montreal Canadiens, I think this is exactly what they are. I really do. And I heard about all the depth they have and how they can hit you with 4 lines. But at the end of the day, Lepore, the top end talent is not there. Tyler Toffoli on Saturday night officially became their leading scorer, passing Jeff Petrie.
Scored again.
Okay, so this is a team that had Jeff freaking Petrie leading the team in scoring for 2 to 3 weeks. So I get it. They have some talent as you move down the roster, but this is not a team that can consistently generate offense. It's just not. There's a formula that they need to have in order to beat a team like the Leafs, in order to beat a team even like Edmonton for that matter, right? You're not going to get into a run and gun game with the Leafs or the Oilers if you're the Habs and try to beat them like that. Like,
let's have some fun right now today, going through those three teams. If Montreal played Winnipeg in a 7-game series, who would you be betting on?
I'm taking Winnipeg.
Edmonton?
Oh man, I'm taking Edmonton.
Okay.
And
wow.
I know that.
Wow, I love it.
I don't know how you feel about that, but first, just looking at the Jets, I love what they have down the middle. And I know Pierre-Luc Dubois hasn't totally found his rhythm. He's been injured. But I look at that matchup and I'm like, okay, they got Scheifele and Dubois down the middle and Connor Hellebuck, who quite frankly is probably the best. You could say he's the best goalie in the world.
Unreal,
really.
Yeah.
I mean, I know Carey Price is great and his resume and all that, and we've seen what he's done, but Connor Hellebuck's awesome. So you just think about that dynamic, and I think I take them over the Habs in a 7-game series, especially when you add in the other pieces the Jets have on offense. They have more talent than the Habs, straight up. It's just a fact. Their defense core isn't great, but again, I think that could sort of be neutralized by the play of Hellebuck. And then when you look at the Oilers, I think that series, Lepore, would be more of a toss-up at Edmonton, Montreal, because it's such a clash of styles.
That'd be an awesome series.
And it's like, do you think McDavid and Draisaitl could just take over? And I think it would be a really close, like 6 or 7 game series. But I don't know. What are your thoughts on that? If you had to match up the Habs with those two teams in a 7-game series?
I would definitely pick the Jets over them. And that's not a shit on Montreal. That's a compliment to the Jets, really. Like, I think the Jets have what it takes to, I might say make a run, but they have that talent so they can beat you with that talent. Edmonton versus Montreal. That is a really tough one. Like, that one could go either way. Because, like, if Montreal neutralized Edmonton as best as they could, I wouldn't be shocked. But then if McDavid just ran all over Montreal, I wouldn't be shocked either. So I hate to agree with you, but I would say like 7-game series coin flip, and it'd be amazing to watch. Like, I'm not even going to take a side. I actually really do feel that way, that that's how it would play out. I wouldn't have a dog in the fight. But what's going to be interesting to see is at the end of the season, because these teams are playing each other so many times, when we do see those standings, is how they did against each other and versus certain teams. Like, for example, whoever finishes 3rd versus 4th and gets to avoid, and I guess in any division we can say, whoever, we'll talk about this division, whoever can say avoid Toronto in the first round, finishing 3rd or 4th, or even who falls right out between 4 and 5. It's going to be interesting to see how those teams did, number one, versus each other, because like 20% of the season is played against that team, like 15-20% of the season, and then how they did against Ottawa, and then how they did against Toronto. So again, talking points, it doesn't really matter. Each game has the same value, but it is going to be cool. It is going to be cool to see, like, you know, to look at a team and say they got in because they were able to get points from Toronto, or this team didn't get in because they lost points to Ottawa, or head to head. Oh, look, this team won 7 out of the 10 games. That's why they're in. So again, it'll be fun. It'll be fun till the end.
Oh yeah, big time. That'll be interesting to see. Like, the teams that probably make the playoffs in the Canadian division are going to crush Ottawa, probably play well against Vancouver, and then give the Leafs a run for their money.
Yeah. Like,
it'll be very interesting to see how that shakes out at the end of the season, because I think it's going to be a dogfight for those, you know, let's say final couple playoff spots in the Canadian
division. It's going to be awesome. What's going to be amazing too, and this is not getting enough attention, is because these are series. Teams are playing each other multiple games in a row. So I haven't looked at it since the beginning of the year, but to see, for example, if teams are playing each other the last 2 or 3 games, and these are teams that could be battling for a spot, like, how awesome will that be if, say, I don't know, Edmonton and Calgary are battling for number 4, and they're playing each other the last 3 games.
Oh, that would be incredible.
Like, we're hoping for that, right? We're really hoping for that. And I guess too, it's going to be so interesting to see what teams do at the deadline, because like, how far are teams going to be out of it, really? Especially if you can look ahead and say, okay, we're 6 points out of it, but the team we're chasing, we're playing 5 more times. It's like, so we have a chance. So do they sit on that, or they go for it? It's going to be awesome to see, and stuff we're going to talk about for a long time.
Oh yeah, absolutely. It's just such a unique year with the 56 game schedule, the Canadian division. It's going to be an awesome season, and I can't wait to see how this playoff race shakes out.